What if the current pandemic isn't destroying businesses at all? What if the pandemic is revealing the truth about businesses that maybe were already broken, business models that were outdated? And that's why I am so looking forward to this particular conversation with Jim Harris. Jim speaks all over the world, big stages, big audiences on the subject of disruptive innovation. In fact, I first found Jim's work back in the early part of the 2000s with his book, The Learning Paradox, which I think we're going to touch on a little bit. But what I really want to focus on to get Jim to wind your watch on this, Jim, is that you're featured in this magazine not too long ago called Disruption. The headline is Death to Driving, because I know disruptive innovation is your area, and you raise the question with the photograph. Is it more demonic? Is it more sinister? What is it? The world wants to know.
Yeah, like Garrett, the magazine sent a professional photographer to my office who took 300 photos of me, and this is the one they picked. Like, Garrett, I think my time as a runway model is like over before it began.
But yet it perched over your right shoulder.
Yeah, here it is right here.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking there's an alter ego to Jim Harris.
Yes. So do I A, look sinister, B, do I look evil, or C, demonic, and or D, all of the above, right? So yeah, it was just a really fun cover. So this is a great example, like something that you wouldn't want to choose as your photo. It's very memorable, right? So like, who the heck would choose to go into this COVID crisis? But it's actually, as you're saying in the introduction, it is highlighting how broken business models were of many organizations, and how every company that focused on digital transformation and digital first is thriving. So let's just look one example. In December, Zoom had 10 million daily users. In March, it was 200 million. So my question is, how many companies have experienced a 20x growth in customer count as a result of COVID-19? In April, it's 300 million. So month over month, they've grown by 50%. And I believe the genie is out of the bottle. It's never going to go back in. When we go back to normal, whatever normal is, it won't be the same because companies prohibited people from working from home. Now they're going to say, oh, they can, and they're happy, so we're going to let them work from home for 2 or 3 days a week. And then what happens to the value of commercial real estate? Because companies say, wow, if people are home for 2.5 days on average, why do we need this square footage? Really expensive. We're going to cut it in half, let employees hotel, just like when I go to Philadelphia, I rent a hotel for a day. So they're going to hotel office space. People are going to say, I'm going to come in on Wednesday. I want an office and a boardroom for a meeting I'm having with some clients. And they're going to cut their square footage in half and drive millions of dollars directly to the bottom line. So what are the implications for commercial real estate?
You know, and this is just one of the topics you brought up in your Tech Canada webinar, which is why I was so anxious to talk to you further about this. I highly recommend Jim's webinar. I actually listened to it twice and took some notes. And, you know, here we are in the spirit of helping business move forward, because right now these are historic times. Jim, I thought one of the most, in addition to embracing all things digital and acquiring digital fluency, I thought one of the most profound things you said, and I want you to expand on this. How can you pivot? Everyone, that's a favorite word now, right? First there was unprecedented, now there's the pivot, okay? But how do organizations do this? And think of it metaphorically, the mindset of the 65-year-old CEO who still needs the secretary to print off the emails. I just want to hear you do a deeper dive on the mindset shift that's going to be required to embrace all things digital.
So this is a great question, Garrett. So Uber is worth more than every taxi cab company in North America added together. And so while the taxi industry owns billions of dollars of assets in the form of cars and limousines, Uber doesn't own a single vehicle, but it's worth more. So this highlights one thing to me, that an app is a huge multiplier on the valuation of your business. And it's alarming to me that more than half of businesses in North America do not have an app. Do you see a problem there? So
Yeah.
if our metaphor, if our central theme is that digital first, aggressive digital transformation means that companies are thriving and those that aren't are being crushed, this COVID crisis is highlighting that in Technicolor. So what is the response of the taxi cab industry? Well, you know, Checkered Cabs is spending $250,000 developing its own app. And my attitude is, good for them. You know, and Diamond Taxi is spending $250,000 on its app. And, you know, I don't know about you, but the reason I got this thing was to download 19 different taxi apps in my home city. And with my fat thumbs, key my data into each one. Not. So the cab companies don't get it. I'm never going to download 19 different, you know, Toronto taxi apps. But I don't just work in Toronto. I'm in Shenzhen and Stockholm and London, England and San Fran. You know, if the taxi industry globally thought differently and developed one global taxi app, call it Global Taxi App, brilliant marketing, you know, Global Taxi App, I would download it. And the beauty for the industry is they'd only share in 1/19,000th of the development cost. And I would download it. So they need to think at what I call a meta level, a higher level of thinking than the current business model that they're in.
So that's the taxi industry. Now, let's just suppose, Jim, you and I don't know who's going to be watching this or when, but for the typical small to medium-sized business owner, business leader, let's say 50 to 200 employees, how do they take what you did in the webinar and start to distill it for their business model? What are the implications for anyone watching this right now?
So I was just talking to a colleague, and I might end up doing some work with the American Gem Society. So imagine there are 1,000 different gem stores in the US. Should they each spend $250,000 on an app development? No. The gem industry should collaborate, call it co-opetition, and develop an app for gems that sell to the world via smartphone. And maybe it's even part of a bigger, you know, maybe it's between jewelers and gem stores, you know, but it requires this different thinking. I also want to highlight that if you stop people in the street and say, hey, what's innovative? They'll say the iPhone's innovative. It isn't. It was in 07, but the point of this is that 75% of the answers you get on the street will be about a product. Okay, but product only yields 10% of the value in an ecosystem of innovation. 90% of the value is in 4 other areas, and I'll talk about one of them, which is business model innovation. So let's go back to Uber. We're Uber, and we have perfected delivering people from point A to point B using an app, okay? The product is the car and a driver. So would you, Gare, agree with me that a taxi and an Uber is exactly the same product, and it's a car and a driver?
Across the board, universally, absolutely.
That's the product. But if we're focusing on business model innovation and we're Uber, if we can deliver people from A to B and bill your credit card, could we deliver a burger? I'm asking you, not rhetorically. Could we deliver? Okay, let's call it Uber Eats. They did $6 billion of business last year delivering burgers. Okay, if we can deliver a burger, if we can deliver a person, Could we deliver your pet to the veterinarian? Yes? Okay, let's call it Uber Pet. It's up and running in test markets. Because like during COVID, I can't get out of my house. My dog's sick, it's vomiting. And who wants to go sit in the vet's office? So I call Uber Pet, it picks up Buffy and takes Buffy to the vet. And I don't have to wait 3 hours at the vet. The vet calls me. Once Buffy's fixed or surgery done or injection or whatever, Uber Pet brings it back. If we can do burgers, pets, people, could we do manila envelopes and banker's boxes? Let's call it Uber Courier, okay? You see, if I'm working at the business model level to innovate, as opposed to the product, should my cab be yellow or should it be green or should it be blue? I can innovate and disrupt all sorts of different industries. Like we're in lockdown. What about Uber Liquor? Gare, do you think that'd be popular, eh?
Oh,
Uber Liquor.
It goes on and on and on. And I'm just thinking of, and like I say, I'm encouraging everyone I talk to and run into to grab your webinar and really go through it. The one thing that circles back to the learning paradox, and I want to acknowledge this, Jim, you were on the front line. You've been on the front lines of innovative thinking, Moore's Law, all those things for quite some time. But if you go back to the learning paradox, you know, you coined it back then. People, what do they need most to be able to do? Learn to adjust to the changing world. You were talking about this when the internet first came on board. What do people hate to do? Learn and change. I mean, yeah. They need to learn and change. What do they hate to do? Learn and change.
So I often think about learning as like becoming a little child again. We are very competent at what we do as adults. We've gotten used to being comfortable, and learning brings discomfort. So people are being forced to use Zoom or Microsoft Teams or, you know, GoToMeetings or WebEx or whatever. And if they don't know, if they've never used it before, they're uncomfortable. So it's that discomfort that keeps us or prevents us from learning and changing. And yet, this COVID crisis is showing us we have to learn and change. And so many organizations prohibited people working from home because the boomers who run the businesses, they grew up, no, you got to put your 40, to 60 hours in. And like, if I don't see you at my desk before I get in, you're not working hard enough, or if you don't stay later than I do. Well, now we're realizing we can all work from home. So the genie is out of the bottle. It's never going to go back to the way it was. So this COVID crisis is forcing organizations to break barriers, to learn and to change. And I find it an incredibly fascinating time we're living in.
Yeah, I've just gotten into the habit very recently of wrapping these conversations up with the BBQ. Because right now, summer's come, spring, summer, we're out barbecuing, but I think more relevant for the BBQ is the better, bolder question that business owners and leaders need to be asking. If you were to summarize it, Jim, what is the better, bolder question that needs to be asked right now for anyone watching this?
Well, Gare, I watched your seminar that you did for tech, and there were some profound questions in it. So one of them was, how do we shift from selling to connecting and helping? So what has Uber done during this crisis? They have said, we're going to waive fees for Uber Eats delivery. Now, why would they do that? First off, number one, they're going to gain market share. And people who've never used Uber Eats and can't get to their favorite restaurant are going to say, hey, let's get this by Uber Eats. Secondly, so they're going to gain market share when nobody can go out to restaurants. Secondly, they're throwing a lifeline to every restaurant partner by saying, we're going to work to keep the ecosystem of restaurants who've signed up with us in business during this difficult time for them. So they are helping their customers by not charging delivery fees. They're helping their partners by keeping them afloat. And ultimately, they're helping themselves in marketing by gaining market share, because millions of people will be introduced to Uber Eats during this time of COVID crisis. So that is a win-win-win. So how do I take this crisis and turn it into a triple win?
What I'm hearing from Jim Harris, it's Uber is just but one example of a lend-lease type mentality that certainly existed between the United States and Britain during the Second World War. If there is a one-word business cure for COVID-19, it would be innovation. But as Jim Harris has explained, digital fluency in all aspects of the business, the products and services you provide in terms of delivery and fulfillment, your internal operations that allow you to scale, and your digital marketing efforts. These are the things that I think you're going to find going forward to be very, very useful in terms of how you and your entire organization and as a business community can all move forward, lead together, and emerge stronger in these historic times.